NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.
Well, hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. The front lines of the war on terror are the streets in every city across America. The attack on New York yesterday is proof of that. The terrorist from Uzbekistan mowed down 8 people and injured 11 more before a hero cop took the jihadist out, saving who knows how many more lives. Once again, it was a good guy with a gun, a police officer who stops a bad one, a terrorist. It's usually the only way to stop evil. As for the attack, the left will tell you it's not about immigration. They will say he was a lone wolf. I will tell you they are wrong. There is no such thing as a lone wolf. ISIS-inspired is ISIS. And yes, it's all about immigration. Whether it's the so-called diversity visa program, which this attacker came in on, or student visa programs, which the 9/11 attackers used, the bottom line is we have allowed nearly 2 million Muslims from predominantly Muslim countries into the United States since 9/11. Now, make no mistake, the large majority of them are good, law-abiding people. But the stark reality is it only takes one to rain terror down upon us. Extreme vetting needs to be done. The president insists that process will be stepped up. Radio host Mark Levin weighed in on Fox News yesterday.
This diversity visa program should be gutted. We don't need a diversity visa program where 50,000 people a year come into this country through a lottery system because we want diversity from different countries. And we seem to forget the purpose of immigration. Historically, the purpose of immigration is to improve the United States, is to benefit the United States, not to ensure diversity from foreigners coming into this country, not to ensure that certain countries are well represented or even certain refugees are coming here from wherever they're coming from. Immigration is supposed to improve the United States.
Well, we know liberal activist judges are getting in the way, playing politics with our safety and security. Immigration is not a right. Owning a firearm is. Those people run over on a bike path on the west side of Manhattan had no way to protect themselves. The leaders in their city and state have all but disarmed them. Gun control didn't stop a terrorist. Instead, he went out and rented a truck, then used it as a weapon. Now remember, after a mass shooting, liberals call for more gun laws and gun bans. We call for proactive policing and reforms to the mental health system, real solutions. Let me make this very clear. Every Democrat and liberal gun hater in America needs to hear this. After this latest vehicle attack, and there have been more than a dozen in the Western world, I am not calling for the banning of trucks or pressure cookers, weapons used by terrorists. I'm calling on Congress to shut the front door to would-be jihadists. This attacker walked right in. So did the 9/11 hijackers. When will America wake up? Evil is at our doorstep. We need to lock the door. Well, I want to turn now to Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff Clarke, it is great to have you on the program. Great to see you again. Sorry under these circumstances.
Grant, it's always my pleasure.
So you've spent a long time in law enforcement. Thank God there was a good guy with a gun, a police officer in this attack. But in many respects, I think maybe this attack didn't need to happen.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. You know, let's peel this back for a little bit because there's enough blame and finger pointing that'll go on, mainly between politicals over the next couple of weeks in Washington, D.C. But this was a border security failure. That's what it was, this diversity visa program and all this other happy horse crap that goes on, mainly pushed by the left. Look, this guy was in the country, should not have been let into the country. You know, the enemy is among us. There are a lot of individuals on this visa program that are here. They overstay their visas, and we can't keep up with them. Look, we're a target-rich environment. That's why these things can happen. But the goal of a terror program, anti-terror program, I should say, is to prevent, deter, detect, and disrupt acts of terror. But when I look at what happened in New York City yesterday, and the information is still coming in, and I want that to happen. But early on, I could say this handshoe agreement, HANDSH, I think it's SCHU, was designed in the 1960s to protect war protesters from being spied upon by government agencies. All right, that was well-intentioned back then. The NYPD and their terrorist, anti-terrorist, or counter-terrorist initiatives are being handcuffed by this handshoe agreement that says they cannot surveil mosques, they cannot surveil individuals. And so if we're going to ask NYPD to do what they can to prevent, deter, disrupt and detect terror, then we have to give them all the tools. Now, look, there's a balance here. I want to make that clear, because if you look at the Patriot Act, after the 9/11 Commission, it went too far in terms of trampling on people's rights. So then they came back and they improved it after it expired. And they wanted to make sure that our government agencies that are responsible to protect us have the tools, but at the same time, we want to protect individual liberty. So there's a sweet spot here, and it's always going to be out of balance a little bit. We got to try to find that balance. But when we don't do that, we end up with what we saw in New York yesterday.
So, Sheriff David Clarke, you've got that handshoe agreement, but, I think it actually breaks down even more simple than that. New York was doing surveillance of mosques. There's no expectation of privacy to send an undercover police officer into a mosque and simply look and listen. I don't think that's out of bounds of the law. Do you?
I don't think it's out of bounds at all. I mean, this is the 21st century war, and our agencies are being held to 20th century standards, and that's highly problematic. Now, in New York, there have been local judges who have wrapped the NYPD for some of the practices, their counterterrorism practices. They made them throw away just a plethora of information that they'd gathered over time on potential would-be terrorists. They made them destroy those records. This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about that gets in the way. These judges that sit in the safety and security of their courtrooms that are heavily armored, right, with armed security, and everyone who comes into there is screened through the magnetometers, so on and so forth. But the rest of the world has to live, without that sort of stuff. And I think it's a real shame that the judicial branch is treading on the separation of powers and the authority of the executive branch, and that's Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, to keep this nation safe and secure. So as long as we have that interference from individuals in the judiciary who have no idea whatsoever on how to keep this nation safe, we're going to continue to see this stuff. Unless we empower law enforcement, I don't mean give them everything they want, but as long as we're going to tie their hands, we're going to be, we're going to be sitting ducks, and it's going to be very difficult in the prevention mode and the detection mode and the disruption mode against terror.
So, Sheriff David Clarke, when you look at what the liberal activist judges are doing, clearly they were taking the lead from the Barack Obama administration. They're playing politics with the safety and security of America. This started with Barack Obama. And when you look at events like we have today and the immigration policies we have in place, I have to say, and it pains me to say it, but the Obama administration has blood on their hands.
Well, there's no doubt about that. A lot of these activist judges, many of them were appointed by liberal Democrat presidents, but that's neither here nor there at this point. What I find highly problematic is that you get individuals here who know nothing about anti-terrorism initiatives, counterterrorism initiatives, and they're making basically policy decisions in terms of what these agencies can do. So, the other thing that I find highly problematic is that when it comes to the judiciary, there's no accountability. What can we do with an activist judge? Nothing. What can we do with an elected member of Congress who we think is not doing his or her job any longer? We can unelect them and re-elect somebody else. What can we do with the President of the United States? We can do the same thing. We can't do that with the judiciary.
Sheriff Clarke, Congress does have the power to change the way those courts are set up. You can't take a judge out of his position, but you can change the Ninth Circuit. You can break up what areas that they represent and rule on. That is something that Congress needs to think about. Now, Sheriff, you've been spent a long time in law enforcement. One of the things that strikes me now, and this has been going on for a long time, is that law enforcement officers today find themselves on the front lines of the war on terror. That they are literally in the middle of a war trying to keep us safe. Is this what cops signed up for?
No, but it's been thrown onto their plate. They do play a role, but they need more tools. I mean, there are some states that prohibit their local law enforcement agencies from exchanging information with the feds, from exchanging information with agencies, federal agencies like ICE and the CPB, the Border Protection Agency. So, going back to the Congress thing, those people are cowards. You're right. They do have things within their purview under the Constitution to get a hold of a runaway judiciary. But like I said, they look at the judiciary as if these people are gods and they're afraid of them, and they cower in their sight and they're afraid to do anything about it. So, until we begin to get real about what needs to be done to get better. Look, we're a target-rich environment. We don't want to shut down society to the point that we can't move about in a free society, enjoy ourselves, but at the same time, we got to find that sweet spot. And it's there. But it's going to take some courage on the part of our elected officials. They have to do something about immigration. President Donald Trump is the only one, and he ran on it, to improve our immigration system. If there are some things in it that in the 21st century we say, hey, we find that a little distasteful, that's fine. The Congress can act on those things, reform our immigration system, and that's going to go a long way in helping law enforcement in the role that the difficult role they play today.
Yeah, well, sadly, Congress has been slow to act on just about anything right now, even when they control both the Senate and the House. And it really is troubling because Americans, by and large, are hungry for action out of Congress. Last question for you, Sheriff David Clarke, before I let you leave. Look, New York has all but disarmed its citizens. The terrorist ends up going out and getting a truck. I can only imagine if somebody had an ability to protect themselves early on when this guy got on the bike path. The left will yell at me for bringing this up. But the bottom line is people need the ability to protect themselves in the world that we live in, and New Yorkers simply can't today.
Well, not only do they need the ability, Grant, they have the right to be able to do that. And I want to remind people, too, that the Second Amendment, our Bill of Rights, those are individual rights. And that's what you're getting at here. The individual has the right, not a need, a right to be able to protect themselves. And when government cannot fulfill that role, because government plays a role, our law enforcement agencies play a role, and when government cannot fulfill that role, it needs to allow individual citizens to play a role in their own protection. And that means you have to give them the means with which to do it. And that seems to be the sticking point as far as the anti-gun movement right now. They don't see these as individual rights.
No, they sure don't. Well, Sheriff David Clarke, we appreciate all you did as Milwaukee County Sheriff, and really more than that,
Pleasure.
spreading a word of freedom across this country. Buddy, thank you for coming on the program again.
It's always my pleasure. Enjoy.
I enjoyed it as well. Hey, I want to turn now back to New York and this terror attack, exposing the motives of the most vicious liberals in Congress. Just hours ago, President Trump called out New York Senator Chuck Schumer's support of a visa lottery program that let this terrorist monster loose on our streets. But Schumer fired back almost instantly with this tweet aimed at the president. "I guess it's not too soon to politicize a tragedy," Schumer wrote. Really, Chuck? Let's look at your record of politicizing a tragedy. Here's this gem. You tweeted just hours after the massacre in Vegas. "We didn't even know anything about the shooter, and you were already calling for new gun laws from Congress. A leopard will always show its spots. And you sure are a liberal, gun-hating politician who will do anything to erase our Second Amendment rights." That's why your official response to the New York attack holds no water. You say that the president should reconsider anti-terrorism funding. I think, Chuck, you need to reconsider your support for suicidal immigration policies. Someone who knows all about our suicidal immigration policies and has been exposing them for a long time is veteran Army Ranger and Frontlines correspondent Chuck Colton. Chuck, great to have you on the program.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Grant. I'm here in New York, and it's kind of striking to me. This is one of those cities where the police have been so vilified, so disrespected by many people here. We've seen police here ambushed, killed, and not only disrespected by some of the people in New York, but also disrespected by their politicians. The mayor of New York refusing to honor some of those very slain police officers, but boy, they sure are glad to have them when we have a situation like this. And like you were just saying, with Sheriff David Clarke, listen, I hope people will listen to him. This is a man who knows what he's talking about. This is an honorable cop, and people need to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And every single message that he basically told us there is one that all of us have been pushing for a long time. And it simply is common sense. You need to shut the front door to terrorists coming into this country. And the reality is we already have some sitting at the dining room table.
That's right. You know, if you're fishing and the net that you're using is far too big and the fish are swimming right through the net, well, guess what? You need to get a net with smaller holes. And that's really what we're talking about here. The president is trying so hard to give us a net with smaller holes so that we can capture some of these terrorists before they act. And you know, like I was talking about last hour, there have to be some indicators of a guy who came here in 2010, by all accounts was very happy to be here, worked you know, as an Uber driver, driving people around, and yet all of a sudden just goes off like this. There have to be some indicators, but if we can't, if we don't know what they are and we can't catch those indicators and we're not willing to put the funding into the kind of human intelligence it would take to catch those people beforehand, then the only choice left is to close that net a little tighter. And that may catch some fish we don't want to catch, but that's just the price of doing what we have to do.
Yeah, Chuck, you know, you had alluded to this in the last cut-in that we had, is that people around this terrorist had to have known his ideology, had to have known his thoughts, had to have known even possibly what he was planning. In order to stop these attacks, it's going to take good people to stand up and say something, and most often, that's going to take fellow Muslims to stand up and turn in the people that practice their religion, or at least an extreme version of it.
That's right. It's a matter of assimilation, Grant. These people have to assimilate to American culture. And I think that the fact that nobody stood up and nobody reported this guy is a very clear indicator that many in that Muslim community are not assimilating to American culture. They're not assimilating to a culture that relies on the rule of law, that relies on fairness and justice and you know, respect for the police. And so you know, that is an issue that we need to address. And for the politicians to try to make political hay over you know, gun control, over, you know, that sort of thing, it really is not doing any good. And I think it shows very clearly that they do not care about making this place safer. They only care about solidifying their political base.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck Holton, as always, great work today. We appreciate you coming on. We'll see you at the top of the next hour.
All right, take care, Grant.
Some thoughts about the attack on New York that make it clear to me that evil, number one, is everywhere. There are evildoers in this country that want to do us great harm. We need to wake up to that fact, and yes, we need to proactively police. We need to go after them. We need to hunt them down. We need to open our eyes and ears, look and listen for any sign that someone may have been radicalized. That goes for any criminal, in fact. You have to be aware of your surroundings. Clearly, immigration laws need to be changed. We know that to be a fact. And then, of course, Chuck mentioned it. You've got the police officers. Police in a city that, yes, guys like Mayor de Blasio have turned their backs on. And in return, the police turn their backs on that mayor. That mayor doesn't support the police. He doesn't support what they do. Yet those police officers kept us safe yesterday. One hero cop saved who knows how many lives. We need to give them our respect and thank them for the job that they're doing, fighting back terrorism on the streets of New York City. That's just one job in many that they have to do. So what do we need to do to make this country safer? I have the man with the answer coming up at the top of the hour. A counterterrorism expert will join me. And then, of course, we'll hear from Chuck Holton again, who is in New York. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Grant Stinchfield for NRATV.
You're watching NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.